Hello everyone and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Eachine Novice 3 Ready to Fly kit. You do get this Eachine branded radio and it is already bound up and all the switches and modes set up for the quad. You do also get the Eachine EV800D goggles. These are tried and true goggles. They do work for multiple people, but they are a little bit nose heavy and they can put some pressure on your cheekbones. One feature the goggles do not have is a DVR. We do get this very basic Eachine branded charger. I do approve of the color. This charger is 2 to 4S only, without any charging options. We also get this case that everything fits neatly in. And of course the quad, which is running 1203 5500 kV motors, running 3-inch T-style HQ props, F4 flight controller with an OSD, and also it has the integrated SPI receiver, as well as a 10 amp 4-in-1 ASC. The VTX is power switchable from 25 milliwatts to 400 milliwatts. It also features onboard recording, but mine did not work. And the Caddx EOS 2 FPV camera. I have a buzzer right here, LED lights on the underneath side. The top board is obviously powered through this connector. Mine weighs just over 69 grams. It comes with two Tattoo 3S450 batteries, which brings the all-up weight to just about 110 grams. Motor post for motor post, I'm getting about 135 millimeters. Bottom plate is 3 millimeters thick. Arms are a little over 6 millimeters wide. Camera mounting plates look to be 2 millimeters thick. And the top board is just a little over 1 millimeter thick. Unfortunately, in this flight, I don't have flight audio. I typically include flight audio. I have a little camera that's sitting on the table, and I sync it with a hand clap, and then we get flight audio. In this case, I don't. Unfortunately, for the last couple of months, I've had problems with that camera to where it just randomly shuts down. I spent my first probably half dozen flights with this, just trying to get used to the quad, as well as the much larger radio. If you're not familiar with the channel, I use an X-Lite from FrSky, which is a smaller style radio. It's kind of the same form factor in that it's a game control style, but it's much smaller than this one. So I've spent most of those packs getting used to it. And then I started recording, and I had several flights where I just kind of crashed out, so they weren't really any good. And then this flight, which goes almost to a full pack, it's going to end in a crash. We could probably get another 15 to 20, 25 seconds at the end, but unfortunately, no audio. But I do have a crash clip that will show that's damaged the quad, and I'll probably talk about that a few times during the course of this video. Obviously, it's not physically damaged where you can look at it and see the damage. It's motor damage, but we'll get to listen to what the quad sounds like. It's not very loud by any stretch, so this is something that you could probably fly in a park that's empty, and it wouldn't bother neighboring houses or things of that nature. I think one of the major selling points of getting a ready-to-fly kit that's already set up is you can get to flying right away. You can look at the manual, the instructions, learn about the switches and what position they need to be in to fly in the mode that you want to fly. You probably want to start out with angle mode. If you're in a big open football type space, you can probably start in acro. Flying isn't easy, but it sure is a lot of fun, and I would encourage you to get involved if you have a hankering for RC at all. It's one of the more fun things I've done in RC over the last 30 plus years. But you have Betaflight all set up, you've got a custom tune on the quad, you've got your radio already bound up, you don't have to learn about binding. Even the goggles came on the right channel, so I didn't even have to channel search to find my video reception. It was already there. That could have been luck, I don't know, but it seemed awful odd that, you know, I power them up and it's already got a video signal, so I thought that was pretty cool. And those are some of the major selling points. Additional selling points would be that you can use the goggles and the radio on other quads. So if you wanted to buy an indoor quad for flying on those bad weather days, rainy days, cold days, things of that nature, you could bind them on this radio as long as it supports D8 mode, which most of our whoops, which are indoor quads, do support D8 mode. You could also get other quads that fly outdoors like this one, maybe something a different style, and as long as it supports FrSky D8 mode, you should be able to bind the radio. And we'll look at the binding. The instructions do a pretty good job of laying that out, but we'll go through a sample of it just so you can see it here on the desk real quick. You'll note that we did have quite a bit of wind. You can't hear it, of course, because I don't have my flight audio, but it blew me off course there on a punch out over the house. And this thing flies pretty well, you know, for a machine that's not going to break the bank to get an entire kit that's ready to fly with batteries. It flies pretty dang good. I really don't have much to complain about, and I think if you're starting out, one of the things that can be real tough is if you get a quad that requires a tune or it just doesn't have a good tune on it. This one you can feel reasonably assured that, you know, it has a good tune on it. I'm flying it with the tune as it comes, and you won't have to worry about that aspect. You just have to learn how to control the quad and how to fly it. Of course, you know, learn with hovering, doing straight line sort of stuff, learn about coordinated turns, Once you start getting more comfortable and familiar, then you can go into more dramatic moves. And you see the flight ends at 338 with that crash. That crash did not hurt the quad. The next one that I'll show does. So this is the crash where I damaged a motor, and unfortunately it had an impact. I actually flew the quad several more times doing some recording for the goggles. I wanted to show what the goggles look like, and I'll show that next after this flight sample. But this gives you an idea of what it sounds like, as well as some a little additional flight performance. One of the other things I haven't mentioned yet is it gets pretty good long flight time, and when you're learning to fly, flight time is king, especially if you only have a few batteries. Now, the kit comes with tattoo batteries. You can run those. I'm a big fan of G&B batteries. G&B batteries are available in a lot of different places. If you're in the US, you can also buy race day quad batteries. They're blue labeled. They are made by G&B, so essentially they are the same battery, and I've had good results with those as well. But the tattoo batteries are what I'm running in this particular case, and you probably do want to get either the kit that comes with 6 batteries, or you want to acquire more batteries after the fact. Of course, as you get more and more involved in FPV, you'll want to do other things, like you'll want a charger that can charge more than 1 battery at a time, but that's all down the road. This is about getting started, getting your toe in the FPV water, so to speak, just having some FPV fun. As you can see, I'm going to do a punch out from the chimney side to the shed side. I'm going to get a little bit off target, a little bit blown off target. I'm going to get tangled up the trees. The video goes out and then it comes back. I can't really explain why the video went out other than just the shock of the flight controller and everything taking a little bit of a beating. And then I damage that motor, which causes vibration issues if you get on the throttle very much. This is a sample of what I was trying to show for the video reception and also the goggles itself. Goggles are really hard to give you any true idea, and you're probably looking at the screen going, half of this is in light and half of it isn't. Yes, I used a towel to put over the top, but because of the antenna placement and the shortness of having to get a camera and everything in there, I was not able to get the entire screen underneath the towel without obstructing the antenna, which I didn't want to do, because another part of this is looking at the reception. As I go over to my neighbor's yard and I fly a little bit down below grade or down below the ground level or below where I'm at, however you want to see it, this will give you some assurances of the range that you can get, provided you have the same equipment. If you're using something different, everything goes out the door. But if you're using the kit as it comes, this should give you a pretty good sample of the video reception that you should get, and as well as the screen itself. These screens have been around for a while. They're not the highest quality, nor are they the lowest quality, but as I said in the quick roll, they are tried and true, and the goggles have been around for a long time. Many people have them, and if you have a pair, chime off about maybe modifications that you've made so that anyone who might be looking at this kit might have an idea. Oh, you can see there I do go around the house just fine. Now, I'm not flying with these goggles. That's something to take note of, because obviously I had to stick a camera in them in order to be able to record them, because it does not come with a DVR. And in some ways, not recording DVR is good, because this is the actual reception that you see, versus many times in DVRs we see more breakup than we do when we're actually flying in the goggles. For some reason, DVRs seem to pick up more breakup than we see in the goggles ourselves. So just a little sample. I wanted to make sure anybody who's looking at this kit has a reasonable idea of what they're getting into as far as the goggles go, as well as the video reception. I apologize. I wish I had a better setup that I could have really gotten the screen all dark so the camera could have focused. I actually did this a number of times, and this was the best one that I've gotten. So first off, I want to cover the radio, because we have already talked about the goggles a little bit. So these are all the switches and everything and how it's set up. And this manual does go into your different modes if you're in beta flight. Sorry for all the noise of unfolding. So you have your different modes are all set up and what switch they correspond to in their position. It also tells you about how to operate this. Now, one thing I did talk about was the ability to bind this to other quads. We have our power switch right here. Underneath here is a micro USB slot. So this is a little bit fussy, but again, we're talking budget. It is running OpenTX, as you see there. And we get that warning. This is fine. So when we go into the menu, we see we have a model menu, and then we use these to navigate. Hopefully I can get that. There we go. There's no glare. So I'm going to go to the right. Now, normally in OpenTX, this would be the page where you find the bind command. So in the case where you need to rebind the quad to this radio, or you have a different quad you've bought, like a Mobula 6 or something else that runs D8 protocol, FR Sky D8 protocol. The binding procedures are right here in the instructions. Of course, if you misplace these paper instructions, there's a downloadable version available on the Banggood website. And as you can see right here, you go to the CLI, so you plug in your quad with a USB cord, and you go into Betaflight, so you have to have that application downloaded and running on your machine. And on the left-hand side, you'll see where it says CLI, and then you type bind_RX_SPI. That puts the quad into binding mode. And then down here on the radio, so you press the EXT button right here, and you press and hold that down just like it has in the picture, and then you slide this while you have that down. That puts the radio into binding mode, and then they should link up and be all set. You also have, for this particular quad, some instructions about whether to tell whether it's bound up or not. In the case where the machine loses its bind, you do have the ability to rebind. Of course, you can bind other models. You might want to, for your first start, set up a second model within OpenTX and bind to that model rather than starting by rebinding a different quad to the same model. Normally when I bind up, if I'm binding up multiple quads with one protocol, I use the same model. On this one, I'm just not certain about whether you need to use different models or not, so I would encourage you to set up a secondary model, which the interface will walk you through doing in order to bind a different quad. Of course, model 1 is this quad. The only thing I would call out about this is it's large, and I'm a pincher, and I think if you didn't have the years of experience, I would probably have been better off, but of course my flying wouldn't have been as good. But this will work fine for a pincher or thumber, in my opinion. Of course, it all depends upon your comfort, your hand size, things of that nature. The switches are all in reasonable positions. You do have a lanyard, so you can hang this from your neck, but it does not include a lanyard to hang it from your neck. On the back, something that's a nice touch is these are kind of rubberized grip pads, so it helps to hold those things in your hand if you don't use the lanyard. And of course, this is just a carrying bar up here, which I did use quite a bit because I fly at home and I carry these things out to the backyard, and I just got to hook a finger. I don't have a tendency to drop anything, so I haven't had problems using that. The battery tray here on the back, you can see it's a pretty large battery tray, and it does use a 2S or 3S battery. I think you have to use a 3S battery, but you can see I've got one of these. These are not good batteries. Don't buy these for flying. These are my bench batteries, and I just stuck one in there in order to be able to use the radio. And it is pretty sizable, so you should be able to get a fairly sizable battery in there, but it will need to be square. If you're looking at a 1000 milliamp battery that's long, that won't fit. You'll need something that's a little bit shorter and square. This is a 3S 550 if you wanted to know. I need to go back to the goggles here for just a moment to note that this is a proprietary connection here for charging. So it's not a micro USB. It does come with a charging cable, but should you damage that or lose that, you might have to rig something up or tear this down in order to be able to recharge. It does have a battery in the front here. You could poke a hole in this plastic or something if you were to damage that in order to make that battery accessible and then recharge it that way. But I wanted to bring that up so that no one is under any sort of misconceptions that this charges via micro USB or USB-C or anything like that. It has this specialized connector here, which is a pretty small connection. The only thing that I've done to mine was I secured my battery lead down because it just hangs off here the side, so I didn't have enough length to go around the arm, which would have been my preference. I think I talked about that in the last video. So normally I would bring this off the back of the arm and underneath and then secure it to the arm, but because the lead length is short enough and with my batteries, I had to do it this way, which isn't a terrible thing. It's fine. It's secured down. I've got a little bit of a wrinkle in there, so that gives me some slack when it does tug. It's not immediately putting pressure on the pads to keep the wires intact. I did also secure the antennas down here, which is fine. It's not a big deal. It's just zip tie and some heat shrink, but they come poked out of these top two holes and then they fall to the ground. I'm not crazy about the fact that this is not a carbon fiber board, because that does have the possibility that this entire area just isn't very strong. We've got carbon fiber plates holding our camera into this board. May or may not be an issue, but obviously this board is carrying power, so you need to make sure if you're flying and there's any sort of moisture in the area, especially grass in the summertime, that early morning dew, getting this upside down, it might short out. And I don't know, if you short this out, it might short out your flight controllers, your flight control and your VTX or other things.
we have proprietary parts as well. This mounting pattern is a little bit odd, so if you do have a part that needs to be replaced, it's going to need to be one of these parts. You won't be able to go buy something else off the shelf to experiment. But ready to fly kits, you have to make all sorts of sacrifices in order to meet the budget price point, and those are a few of them. In this case, because I do need to replace at least this motor, I'm pretty sure it's just this motor. Replacing motors is pretty simple because they use connectors. That does have a limit on your performance, but we're flying 3S, we're flying 1203 motors. It shouldn't be limiting all that much. You can tell here from my antenna, it's all smashed. That was from the last crash. I think I came down on my canopy, and then this was up underneath here, and it got smashed. So that's a bit of tin that wraps the antenna. I'm not certain of its purpose in the antenna, but I've seen those so many times. It's not critical. The VTX still works just fine. There's a number of things that I like about this kit is that everything is very serviceable. The one thing I'm concerned about is the durability of this quad. It is pretty stiff. I think I've already covered that. It's not as stiff as we've seen, but we've got a good thick bottom plate. But I'm a little bit concerned about the durability of these motors. You know, I know I crashed. I didn't hit the shed. You probably could hear it. I didn't hit the shed. It just fell to the ground. The ground's relatively soft because we had the snow melt off. So I'm a little bit surprised that I damaged the motor. But, you know, those things happen. It could have landed at just the right angle to damage the motor. So, you know, take my concern of durability with a grain of salt. But it's something that I've brought up several times here. And, you know, I want everybody to have a good flight experience. I want everybody to get started into something that can bring them some joy and some fun. I should mention that I did fly in the flight footage with the tune that it comes with, so it's already custom tuned. And as far as a starter goes, I think the tune's pretty good and that you shouldn't have too many problems with it. And I think, you know, if you're starting out, you probably wouldn't know the difference between a well-tuned quad and a poorly tuned quad. I think it took me, a year and a half before I really started getting my hands around tuning and what I wanted out of my tune. So starting out, I think this is very, very serviceable. And that's one of the selling points, is that you can get this kit, charge your battery, read the manual for your switches, and you're ready to start learning to fly. You don't have to think too much about things. Even the charger's dead simple. You just plug it into the balance port that fits and it starts charging. It doesn't give you any options. You don't need to know about high voltage charging or standard volt charging. It does mean that you don't have the option to bring your batteries back down to storage. So that's something that you have to think about, is where you stop your flight at, is maybe you want to stop at 3.55 so the battery recovers on disarm to 3.8, which is storage charge. It does come with those two batteries, which gets you started. You can use one on the radio. You can use the other one on the quad. You can go fly pack. You can then recharge, go round and round until you get more batteries. I see it has two different kits, and neither one of them are in stock, so that's kind of a bad thing. I see the Ready to Fly 2 battery version at $199 and the 6 battery version at $224.99. And I will say that is... comparing it to one of my first drones, that is quite a bit less than I spent. I think I spent $250 on just the drone and the radio. This was 4+ years ago. And then I had to spend like another $150 to $200 with my goggles. My first goggles were the Hobby King, the Quantum, not the Cyclops, but I forget the name. They were these foam padded goggles that had the backup screen inside of them, and then you had to get a full-size receiver on it, and it was quite a setup, but it worked, got me started, I loved it. So this is a lot less expensive. I'll put a link down in the video description if you're interested in checking this out. If you have any other comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.